commander of the Galactic Council's emergency response fleet, had seen many terrible things in his 40 cycles of service. He had witnessed the collapse of 3 civilizations, survived the plague of Prime, and even lived through the terrifying encounter with the void wraiths of the Outer Rim. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what he was seeing on the scanner displays of his flagship, the Eternal Vigilance. "Sir," his communications officer, Lieutenant, spoke with a trembling voice that betrayed her usual composure. "The distress signal is definitely coming from the 3rd planet of this system, the one the locals call Earth." A's 4 eyes focused on the holographic display floating above his command chair. The blue and green planet looked peaceful enough from their current distance of 50,000 kilometers, but the readings told a different story entirely. The electromagnetic signatures were off the charts. Radiation levels that should have sterilized all life. Atmospheric conditions that fluctuated wildly between extreme cold and unbearable heat. And most disturbing of all, massive energy discharges that suggested ongoing warfare on a planetary scale. "How long ago did we receive the distress call?" A asked, his tentacles nervously coiling around the armrests of his command chair. "Approximately 6 standard hours ago, sir," A replied, checking her instruments. "But, sir, there's something strange about it. The signal wasn't sent in any of the recognized galactic languages. Our translation systems had to work overtime to decode it, and even then we're not entirely sure we understood it correctly." "What did it say?" "According to our best translation, it said, 'Hey, anyone out there? We're having a bit of trouble down here. Could use some help if you've got the time. Thanks.' That was it, sir. No coordinates, no threat assessment, no casualty reports. Just that." A's skin changed to a deep purple, a sign of confusion among his species. In 40 cycles of emergency response, he had never received such a casual distress call. Usually, civilizations in crisis were screaming for help, begging for immediate evacuation, or sending detailed reports about whatever catastrophe was befalling them. This was more like someone asking for directions to the nearest fuel station. "Sir," the science officer, Dr. N, interrupted from his station. "I'm getting some very strange readings from the planet's surface. There appear to be multiple ongoing disasters simultaneously." "Explain." Dr. N's scales flickered nervously as he consulted his instruments. "Well, sir, on the continent they call North America, there's what appears to be a massive volcanic eruption. The energy output is equivalent to approximately 50 antimatter bombs. On the continent called Asia, there are seismic readings suggesting earthquakes measuring 8.7 on the standard scale. In the Pacific Ocean, there's a tropical storm system with wind speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour. And on the continent called Australia," he paused, double-checking his readings. "Australia appears to be on fire, the entire continent." "By the void," whispered navigation officer from her station. "How is any civilization supposed to survive all of that at once? They must be in complete chaos down there." A stood up from his command chair, his full 3-meter height imposing even among his own crew. "Prepare the emergency fleet for immediate deployment. Ready all medical supplies, emergency shelters, and evacuation ships. This is clearly a planetary extinction event in progress. How many survivors are we likely to find?" "That's the strange part, sir," Dr. N said, his voice filled with confusion. "According to our scans, there are still approximately 8 billion life forms on the planet, and, sir, they don't appear to be in shelters." "What do you mean they don't appear to be in shelters?" "I mean they're outside, sir, moving around. There are massive transportation networks still operating, cities that are still functioning. In some areas, there even appear to be recreational activities taking place." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's engines. A felt his mind's reeling. 8 billion beings on a planet experiencing multiple simultaneous natural disasters, and they were still going about their daily lives. "There must be some mistake," he said finally. "Run the scans again." "I've run them 4 times, sir. The results are consistent. There are humans, that's what they call themselves, actually traveling toward the disasters. Not away from them, toward them." Lieutenant A looked up from her communications console. "Sir, I'm receiving multiple communications from the planet's surface. They don't appear to be distress calls." "Put them through." A series of audio transmissions filled the bridge. The universal translators worked frantically to convert the alien language into something the crew could understand. "Beautiful sunrise over the volcano this morning, folks. Temperatures reaching 45 degrees Celsius, but we've got our hats and sunscreen, so we're ready for another day of hiking. Winds are picking up to about 250 kilometers per hour, but the surf is absolutely perfect. We're expecting some gnarly waves today, dudes. Earthquake measured 8.2 on the scale, but the building codes held up pretty well. Minor damage to the shopping mall, but the coffee shop is still open, so not a bad day overall. The transmissions cut off, leaving the bridge crew staring at each other in stunned silence. They're treating these disasters like entertainment, asked A. Before anyone could answer, A spoke up again. Sir, we're receiving a direct communication. It appears to be directed specifically at us. Put it through. A new voice came through the speakers, speaking in that same strange, casual tone they had heard before. Hey there, this is ground control on Earth. We saw your big ship up there and figured you might be here about our distress call. Thanks for coming so quick. We're doing all right down here, but we could use a hand with something if you don't mind. Nothing too serious, just a little situation we're dealing with. You folks free to chat. I looked around his bridge. His crew, all veterans of countless emergency situations, looked as bewildered as he felt. This is Commander of the Galactic Council Emergency Response Fleet, he said into the communications array. We received your distress signal and are prepared to begin immediate evacuation procedures. What is the nature of your emergency? Oh, evacuation? Nah, we're good on that front, Commander. Thanks, though. Really appreciate the offer. We were actually hoping you might be able to help us with a little asteroid problem we've got coming our way. Asteroid problem? Yeah, there's a pretty big rock headed our way. About 15 kilometers in diameter. Should be here in about 6 hours. We've got most of the preparations handled, but we could use a little extra firepower to help break it up. You guys wouldn't happen to have any ship-mounted weapons, would you? Dr. N was frantically scanning his instruments. Sir, he whispered urgently, I'm detecting the asteroid they mentioned. It's massive. Direct impact would cause a global extinction event. Why aren't they evacuating? Because they're planning to fight it, I said slowly, the realization dawning on him. They're not running from the disasters on their planet. They're living with them, and now they want our help to fight an extinction-level asteroid. The voice from Earth continued cheerfully. We've got about 40 nuclear missiles ready to go, and 3 of our space agencies are launching interceptor ships as we speak. Figured if you folks had some energy weapons or something, we could put together a pretty decent fireworks show and get this thing taken care of. What do you say? I found himself sinking back into his command chair. They want to fight an extinction asteroid with nuclear weapons and a fireworks show. Sir, I said quietly, they're asking for our response. For a long moment, I stared at the peaceful-looking planet on his display. A world that was simultaneously experiencing volcanic eruptions, massive earthquakes, continent-spanning fires, and devastating storms. A world whose inhabitants were not only surviving these conditions, but seemed to be thriving in them. A world that was about to be hit by an asteroid capable of ending all life, and whose population was asking for help not to evacuate, but to put on a better fight. Commander, the voice from Earth prompted politely. Still there? No pressure if you can't help out. We understand if you folks are busy. We'll probably be fine either way. These things usually work themselves out. Usually work themselves out? I repeated faintly. Oh yeah, the human voice continued conversationally. This is actually the 3rd asteroid this year. Had one back in April, another one in August. Both turned out fine. This one's a bit bigger, so we figured we'd ask for some backup, but hey, if you can't make it, no worries. We've got contingency plans. Dr. N was now frantically searching through his databases. Sir, he said in an awed whisper, according to these readings, they've already survived 2 previous asteroid impacts this year. And they're right. The planet is still here. How is that possible? Asked A. I don't know, Dr. N replied, his voice filled with wonder. According to everything we know about planetary physics, it shouldn't be possible, but the evidence is right there in the geological scans. I took a deep breath and activated the communications array. Earth Ground Control, this is Commander. We would be honored to assist you with your asteroid situation. What do you need us to do? Fantastic. Thanks, Commander. Okay, so here's what we're thinking. We've got missiles launching in T-4 hours. If you could position your ships at coordinates. and the human voice began rattling off a series of numbers with the casual efficiency of someone giving directions to a restaurant. As his crew scrambled to plot the coordinates and prepare their weapon systems, found himself wondering what exactly his emergency response fleet had gotten itself into. They had come to rescue a dying civilization, and instead found themselves volunteering for a collaborative combat operation against a planet-killing asteroid, alongside beings who apparently considered such events routine inconveniences. "Sir," navigation officer called out, "we're in position. Weapon systems are charged and ready." On the main display, I could see the asteroid now, a dark speck against the but growing larger by the minute. Around them, the emergency response fleet had arranged itself according to the humans' instructions. Below them, the blue and green planet continued its rotation, seemingly unconcerned about the massive rock hurtling toward it. "Earth Control, this is Commander. Fleet is in position." "Excellent timing, Commander. We've got visual on your ships from down here. Very impressive fleet you've got there. Our missiles are launching in 60 seconds. Soon as they make contact, feel free to light it up with whatever you've got. Let's make this spectacular." I watched as dozens of small objects launched from the planet's surface, streaking toward the incoming asteroid. The casual enthusiasm in the human's voice was infectious, and despite himself, he found his excitement building. "All ships," he announced over the fleet communications, "prepare to fire on my mark." The human missiles reached the asteroid first, impacting its surface in brilliant flashes of nuclear fire. The massive rock began to break apart, splitting into several large chunks and countless smaller pieces. "Now," commanded. The combined firepower of 12 Galactic Council ships lanced out toward the fragmenting asteroid, energy beams carving through rock and metal. The remaining chunks disintegrated in spectacular explosions that lit up the space around Earth like a small star. The communications from Earth erupted in cheers and applause. "Outstanding! Absolutely beautiful work, everyone. Thanks so much for the assist, Commander. That was even better than we hoped." As the debris field that had once been a planet killer dispersed harmlessly into space, I realized that his crew was smiling. All of them. Even Dr. N, who never smiled at anything. "That was," Lieutenant began, then paused, searching for the right words. "That was actually fun." "Fun," I repeated, tasting the unfamiliar concept. In 40 cycles of emergency response, he had never once thought of his work as fun. Necessary, vital, sometimes rewarding, but never fun. "Earth Control," he said into the communications array, "it was our pleasure to assist you. Is there anything else you require?" "Well, now that you mention it," the human voice replied thoughtfully, "we're having a bit of a situation with some solar flares that are supposed to hit us tomorrow. Nothing too serious, but they might knock out some of our satellites. You folks wouldn't be interested in helping us reinforce our orbital infrastructure, would you? We were planning to do some spacewalks anyway, and extra hands are always welcome." I looked around his bridge. His crew was nodding eagerly, their faces bright with anticipation. "We would be delighted to help," he said, and meant it completely. As the Eternal Vigilance and her escort fleet began moving toward Earth's orbital space, I reflected on the most unusual day of his long career. They had come to rescue a dying civilization, and instead found a thriving world that treated planetary disasters as minor inconveniences and extinction events as opportunities for collaboration. But more than that, they had found something he had never encountered before in all his travels across the galaxy. A species that didn't just survive in impossible conditions, they thrived in them. They didn't run from danger, they ran toward it. They didn't despair in the face of catastrophe, they made jokes and asked for help putting on a better show. For the first time in cycles, Commander found himself looking forward to tomorrow's work. After all, these humans had promised solar flares, and if today had taught him anything, it was that when humans promised something would be interesting, they definitely delivered. 3 days had passed since the asteroid incident, and Commander was beginning to understand why the Galactic Council had such incomplete records about Earth. Every time he thought he had figured out how humans operated, they surprised him with something entirely new. The solar flare situation had been resolved with typical human efficiency and enthusiasm. What I had expected to be a desperate struggle to save critical infrastructure had turned into something the humans called a space party. They had invited the entire emergency response fleet to participate in what they termed orbital construction with a view. complete with something called sandwiches and coffee, shared in the vacuum of space through their remarkably advanced suit systems. Dr. N had spent the entire operation frantically taking notes, muttering about impossible metallurgy and atmospheric processors that shouldn't work. The humans had not only reinforced their satellite network against the solar flares, but had somehow improved it, adding new capabilities that made their communications faster and more efficient than before. Now, as he reviewed the daily reports from his science teams, he was beginning to realize that Earth wasn't just surviving its hostile environment. It was using that environment to become stronger. "Sir," Lieutenant called from her communications station, "we're receiving another transmission from Earth Control." I had learned to approach these calls with a mixture of anticipation and mild anxiety. "Put it through." "Good morning, Commander," came the cheerful voice of Sarah, the human who had become their primary contact. "Hope you folks are doing well up there. Beautiful view of the aurora from the planet today thanks to those solar flares. Really spectacular stuff." "Good morning, Sarah," I replied, finding himself smiling despite his confusion. He had never been on a first-name basis with disaster victims before. "How can we assist you today?" "Well, we've got a bit of an interesting situation developing. Nothing urgent, but we thought you might want to know about it. Seems we've got some visitors coming." Dr. N looked up sharply from his instruments. "I'm not detecting any incoming ships, Commander." "Oh, not ships," Sarah continued cheerfully. "More like, well, we're not entirely sure what they are. They showed up at the edge of our solar system about an hour ago. Big things, really big. Our deep space telescopes are getting some interesting readings." "What kind of readings?" I asked, though part of him already suspected he wasn't going to like the answer. "Hard to say exactly. They're about the size of small moons, kind of crystalline looking, and they're emitting some sort of energy field that's playing havoc with space-time around them. Oh, and they appear to be coming this way." The bridge fell silent. Moon-sized crystalline entities that affected space-time were exactly the sort of thing that made civilizations send desperate evacuation requests to the Galactic Council. "Sarah," said carefully, "are you requesting evacuation assistance?" "Evacuation? Oh, no, nothing like that. We're actually pretty excited about this. First contact with genuinely alien intelligence, you know. We've been preparing for something like this for decades. Actually, we were hoping you folks might want to stick around and help us figure out how to say hello properly." "You want to communicate with them?" "Well, sure. I mean, they came all this way to visit. Seems rude not to at least try to have a conversation. Plus, our xenobiology teams are absolutely beside themselves with curiosity. Doctor has been awake for 36 hours straight just running calculations on their energy signatures." I looked around his bridge. His crew was staring at the communications array as if it had started speaking in mathematical equations. "Sir," Dr. N whispered urgently, "I've just accessed the galactic database on crystalline entities. Commander, these match the description of void crystals. They're not just dangerous, they're considered a galactic-level threat. The last time anyone encountered them, they consumed an entire star system." I felt his blood run cold. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. The entities approaching your system are extremely dangerous. They have been responsible for the destruction of multiple civilizations. You need to begin immediate evacuation procedures." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by what sounded like muffled conversation in the background. "Yeah, we found some references to that in our databases too," Sarah said finally. "Apparently they showed up in the system about 50 years ago and things didn't go so well. But here's the thing, Commander. We think the previous encounters might have gone wrong because nobody tried to communicate properly." "Sarah, these entities don't communicate. They consume. They turn matter into energy and use it to grow larger." "Right, but see, that's where it gets interesting. Our physics team has been analyzing their approach trajectory and energy output, and they don't think the void crystals are trying to consume anything. They think they might be. Well, this is going to sound crazy, but they think they might be trying to communicate through gravitational waves." Dr. N was frantically accessing his databases. "Commander," he said in a strained voice, "she might be right. According to these records, no one has ever tried to respond to the gravitational wave patterns the void crystals emit. Everyone just assumed they were weapons signatures." "Because gravitational wave communication is theoretical at best," I replied. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical. Unless you were the size of a small moon and made of exotic matter, Sarah added cheerfully. Which these guys appear to be. Look, Commander, we've already set up our gravitational wave detectors to try to decode their signals. We're getting some really interesting patterns. Definitely artificial. Definitely complex. If we're right about this, we could be on the verge of the most significant first contact event in galactic history. And if you're wrong, you could be dead in a few hours. Well, yeah, there's that possibility too. But that's true most days here on Earth anyway. Asteroid yesterday, solar flares the day before, Yellowstone's been rumbling all week. We're kind of used to operating under less than ideal conditions. Rubbed his temples with two of his hands, while his other two worked the command console. How long before the entities reach your system? About 6 hours at their current velocity, which gives us time to set up a proper welcome. We've got our best linguists working with the gravitational wave data, and our engineering teams are rigging up a way to send our own gravitational wave signals back to them. You're going to try to talk to them? We're going to try to talk to them, Sarah confirmed. And we were hoping you might want to help. After all, if this works, it's going to change how the entire galaxy approaches first contact situations. If it doesn't work, she paused. Well, at least we'll have gone down trying something nobody's ever tried before. I looked around his bridge. Lieutenant A was nodding eagerly. Dr. N was completely absorbed in his analysis of the incoming entities. Even Navigation Officer A seemed intrigued rather than terrified. What exactly are you asking us to do? He said finally. Well, ideally, we'd like you to position your ships around the system's edge as backup. Not to attack, we definitely don't want to do anything that could be interpreted as hostile, but just in case we need to adapt our approach quickly. Plus, your sensors are probably a lot more sophisticated than ours. The more data we have, the better our chances of getting this right. And if your communication attempt fails, then we improvise. That's what we do, Commander. We figure it out as we go. Dr. N looked up from his console. Sir, I'm detecting the entities now. They've entered the outer system. Sarah is correct about their trajectory and energy output. They're not behaving like the void crystals described in historical encounters. How so? They're slowing down, gradually, as if they're being careful not to disrupt the system's gravitational balance. And sir, he paused, double-checking his readings, they appear to be arranging themselves in some sort of geometric pattern. On the main, the long-range sensors showed the approaching entities. They were indeed massive, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them in impossible ways. But Dr. N was right. They were moving with careful precision, positioning themselves in what looked like a complex three-dimensional formation. That's a communication array, Lieutenant A said suddenly. I've seen similar patterns in our own deep space communication networks. They're setting up to broadcast something. To us, I asked. To the system in general. But sir, if they're using gravitational waves to communicate, they would need to position themselves precisely to avoid interference. That formation would give them maximum clarity for their signals. Sarah's voice came through the speakers again. Commander, are you seeing this? Our gravitational wave detectors are going crazy down here. The patterns are incredibly complex. It's definitely language of some kind. What are they saying? We're working on it. Give us a few minutes. But Commander, this is amazing. We're actually having a conversation with beings made of living crystal who use gravity itself as their voice. This is... Her voice trailed off as she was apparently called away from the microphone. A few moments later, a different human voice came through. Commander, this is Dr. Lisa, head of our xenobiology team. We've managed to decode part of their message. What does it say? Well, it's not what we expected. They're asking permission to enter the system. They're asking if we're willing to meet with them. And Commander, they're apologizing for what happened to the other civilizations. The bridge was completely silent, except for the hum of the ship systems. Apologizing? I asked. According to our translation, they're explaining that previous encounters went wrong because they didn't understand that other species couldn't hear them properly. They were trying to communicate, but without anyone responding in gravitational waves, they thought the other species couldn't perceive them at all. So they tried to get closer, not realizing that their proximity was disrupting the other civilization's technology and planetary systems. Dr. N was nodding slowly. That actually makes sense, sir. If you can only perceive reality through gravitational waves, you might not understand that other species use electromagnetic radiation for communication. You might think you were invisible to them. So they kept getting closer and closer, trying to make contact, Doctor continued. And each time the civilizations would start shooting at them or trying to flee. They interpreted this as rejection and eventually concluded that the other species didn't want contact. So they would leave, but by then, their gravitational fields had already caused catastrophic damage. And they've been trying to figure out how to communicate properly ever since, Sarah's voice added as she returned to the microphone. They've been traveling the galaxy, looking for someone who might be able to understand them, someone who might be willing to try something new. I felt a strange sensation in his chest, something that might have been pride if he had been human. And they found you. Apparently so, and Commander, they're asking if they can approach slowly with your ships as witnesses. They want to try a proper first contact with multiple species present. They're saying, hold on, let me get this translation right. They're saying they would be honored to meet the species brave enough to defend their friends against asteroids. They saw the asteroid incident. Gravitational wave astronomy, Commander. They can see everything that affects space-time in this system. And apparently they were impressed by the cooperation between our species. They want to know if we would be willing to help them make contact with the rest of the galaxy. I looked around his bridge one more time. His crew was watching him with expressions of anticipation and hope. In the space of 3 days, they had gone from an emergency response mission to an asteroid-fighting operation to serving as witnesses for what could be the most significant diplomatic event in galactic history. Sarah, Doctor, he said into the communications array, the Galactic Council Emergency Response Fleet would be honored to assist in this first contact. What do you need us to do? Just be yourselves, Commander, Sarah replied. Be the species that came to help when they thought we needed it. Be the species that stayed to fight asteroids and fix satellites and meet impossible challenges. Be the species that's brave enough to try something that's never been tried before. As he gave orders to position the fleet for the most unusual diplomatic mission in his career, he realized that Sarah had summed up not just humanity, but what humanity had taught his own crew. They had come to Earth expecting to find victims in need of rescue. Instead, they had found partners who had turned disaster into adventure and had somehow managed to transform his emergency response team into something they had never been before: pioneers. The void crystals continued their slow, careful approach, broadcasting their complex gravitational wave messages. And for the first time in galactic history, someone was ready to listen. 6 months had passed since the first successful contact with the void crystals, and Commander A was struggling to write his final report to the Galactic Council. How could he possibly explain what Earth had become in such a short time? The planet below him was still experiencing its usual collection of natural disasters. This week it was Hurricane Miranda in the Atlantic, a 7.8 earthquake in the Pacific Ring of Fire, and a massive dust storm covering most of North Africa. But now, instead of merely surviving these events, the humans were using them as opportunities to test new technologies developed in collaboration with their crystalline friends. The void crystals, who preferred to be called meaning those who sing in gravity in their translated language, had established a permanent research station in Earth's outer solar system. What had once been considered the most dangerous entities in the galaxy were now working alongside human scientists to revolutionize communication, energy production, and space construction. Sir, Lieutenant A called from her communications station, we're receiving the daily briefing from Earth Control. Put it through, A said, settling back in his command chair. The daily briefings had become one of his favorite parts of the day, though they invariably left him with more questions than answers. Good morning, Sarah's voice had become as familiar as his own crew's over the past 6 months. Hope you're doing well up there. We've got some exciting news to share. Good morning, Sarah. What's the situation today? Well, Hurricane Miranda made landfall about 6 hours ago. Category 5, winds up to 200 miles per hour. Absolutely beautiful storm system. They have been helping us study its gravitational effects on ocean currents, and we've made some fascinating discoveries about weather manipulation. Dr. N looked up from his instruments. Weather manipulation. Oh yes, Sarah continued cheerfully. Turns out that if you apply precisely calibrated gravitational fields at specific points in a storm system, you can actually redirect its path or even reduce its intensity. We managed to steer Miranda away from the major population centers and dial down its wind speed by about 30% before it made landfall. You controlled a hurricane, I said slowly. Well, we influenced it. That did most of the heavy lifting, gravity-wise, but the coordination was all human engineering. Doctor's team developed the calculation models, and Captain's people handled the real-time adjustments from the orbital platforms. I rubbed his temples. 6 months ago, humans had been asking for help with an asteroid. Now they were casually mentioning that they had learned to control weather patterns. That's remarkable, Sarah. What else has been happening? Oh, lots of stuff. The earthquake in Japan was really interesting. They helped us set up some gravitational sensors that can detect seismic activity about 6 hours before it happens. We managed to shut down all the major infrastructure and evacuate the affected areas before the quake hit. 0 casualties, and the rebuilding is already with some new construction techniques they shared with us. 0 casualties from a 7.8 earthquake. Yep, though to be honest, that was partly luck. We're still learning how to interpret the gravitational precursors. Give us another few months and we should have the system perfected. Dr. N was frantically taking notes. Commander, he whispered, earthquake prediction has been attempted by dozens of civilizations. It's considered nearly impossible. Nearly, Lieutenant pointed out. The humans seem to specialize in nearly impossible. Sarah's voice continued. But the really exciting news is about the dust storm in Africa. We've been working with the on-atmospheric manipulation, and we think we've figured out how to turn it into a massive solar collection system. I'm sorry, what? The dust particles in the storm are actually perfect for creating a distributed solar collection network. If you embed microscopic gravitational field generators in them, technology that helped us develop, you can use the storm itself as a giant energy collector. The dust particles become like millions of tiny solar panels that feed power back to collection points on the ground. You're using a sandstorm as a power plant. A mobile power plant that also helps stabilize the regional climate. The dust storm was actually causing problems for agriculture in the area, so we're gradually dispersing it while collecting energy at the same time. 2 problems solved with 1 solution. I looked around his bridge. His crew was no longer surprised by these daily revelations, but they were clearly impressed. What had started as an emergency response mission had turned into a front-row seat to watch a species transform itself. Sarah, he said, I need to ask you something. When we first met, your species was dealing with multiple simultaneous disasters and treating them like minor inconveniences. Now you're controlling weather, predicting earthquakes, and turning natural disasters into power sources. How? There was a pause, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. You know, I think it comes down to perspective. Most species see disasters as things that happen to them. We've always seen them as problems to solve. And when you approach a problem with the attitude that there has to be a solution, you usually find one. But the technological advances you've made in 6 months, it's unprecedented. That's the thing about humans, a new voice added. I recognized it as Doctor, one of the human scientists who had been working closely with the... We're really good at learning from other people. They had all this amazing knowledge about gravitational manipulation, but they'd never thought to apply it to planetary engineering because their species doesn't live on planets. We had all these problems that needed solving, but we'd never had the tools to solve them properly. It's like, Sarah searched for the right analogy, it's like we've been trying to fix things with hammers our whole history, and then someone handed us a complete toolbox. Of course we're going to get a lot more done. And they are learning from you as well, Doctor added. They're fascinated by the concept of making things better. Their species has always focused on understanding and observing, but they'd never really thought about actively improving their environment. Working with humans has opened up entirely new fields of study for them. Dr. N looked up from his instruments. Commander, I'm receiving a transmission from the research station. They're requesting permission to speak with you directly. Put them through. The communication system shifted to the gravitational wave translators that had been installed throughout the fleet. When they spoke, their words came through as a deep, harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate through the entire ship. Greetings, Commander. This is Crystal Singer Harmony of Distant Stars. We hope this day finds you well. Greetings, Crystal Singer. It's an honor to speak with you directly. The honor is ours, Commander. We wanted to express our gratitude for your role in facilitating our meeting with the humans. In the time since first contact, we have learned more about the nature of existence than we had discovered in the previous 1,000 cycles of our civilization. How so? Humans have taught us that the universe is not something to be merely observed, but something to be actively engaged with. They have shown us that problems are not obstacles to be avoided, but puzzles to be solved. They have demonstrated that cooperation between different forms of consciousness can create possibilities that neither could achieve alone. I felt a warm sensation in his chest. They've taught us similar lessons. Indeed, and now we wish to share these lessons with the broader galaxy. The humans have proposed an ambitious plan, and we believe it has merit. What kind of plan? Sarah's voice joined the conversation. We want to establish a galactic emergency response network, not just for evacuation and rescue, but for problem solving. Every time there's a disaster anywhere in the galaxy, instead of just trying to minimize the damage, we send teams to figure out how to prevent it from happening again. A network that combines the rapid response capabilities of species like yours, Crystal Singer Harmony of Distant Stars added, with the problem-solving approaches of humanity and the technological capabilities of species like ours. We're calling it the Galactic Solutions Initiative, Doctor explained. Instead of waiting for disasters to happen and then cleaning up afterward, we get ahead of them. Planetary instability, we stabilize it. Asteroid impacts, we develop early warning systems and deflection protocols. Stellar collapse, we find ways to either prevent it or safely relocate affected populations. I felt his mind's reeling. You want to fix the galaxy. We want to make it better, Sarah said simply. One problem at a time, and we want you to lead it. Me? You're the one who brought us all together, Commander, Crystal Singer Harmony of Distant Stars pointed out. You came to Earth expecting to rescue a dying civilization, and instead facilitated the creation of an entirely new form of cooperation. Your crew has been instrumental in every project we have undertaken together. Besides, Sarah added with a chuckle, you're the only species we know that's crazy enough to voluntarily fly toward disasters instead of away from them. Well, besides us. Lieutenant A looked up from her console. Sir, we're receiving confirmation from the Galactic Council. They've reviewed the preliminary reports and are, well, they're requesting immediate meetings with both human and representatives. What did they say exactly? I asked. Quote, we need to understand how a pre-interstellar civilization has achieved technological advances that our most advanced species considered impossible, and why our most dangerous galactic threats are now requesting permission to join the Council as peaceful members. End quote. Sarah laughed. Sounds about right. When do they want to meet? As soon as possible, I replied. They're dispatching a diplomatic fleet to Earth immediately. Excellent, Doctor said. We'll have to clean up the lab a bit. The gravitational wave experiments have left things a little messy. Oh, and we should probably warn them about the volcano situation. Volcano situation? I asked with resignation. Mount Vesuvius has been acting up again, Sarah explained casually. Nothing serious, just some increased activity. We're using it to test some new geothermal energy systems that helped us design. Should make for a pretty impressive demonstration when the Council arrives. You're going to demonstrate your technology using an active volcano. Well, sure. What better way to show that we can handle dangerous situations than to literally show them us handling a dangerous situation? Crystal Singer Harmony of Distant Stars added, we have suggested that they time their arrival to coincide with the solar storm that is predicted for next week. The electromagnetic displays should be quite beautiful, and it will give us an opportunity to demonstrate our new communication shielding protocols. I sank back in his command chair. In 6 months, he had watched humanity transform from a species that barely survived planetary disasters to one that actively sought them out for research opportunities. He had seen the most feared entities in the galaxy become collaborative partners in the most ambitious engineering projects ever attempted. And now they wanted him to help them reorganize galactic civilization around the principle of making everything better. Commander, Sarah's voice prompted gently, what do you think? Are you interested in leading the Galactic Solutions Initiative? looked around his bridge. Lieutenant A was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. Dr. N was already pulling up star charts and making notes about systems that could benefit from their new approaches. Navigation Officer A was plotting courses to a dozen different worlds that had ongoing crisis situations. For 40 cycles, he had been responding to emergencies. For the first time in his career, he was being asked to prevent them. Sarah Crystal Singer Harmony of Distant Stars, he said finally. The Galactic Council Emergency Response Fleet, soon to be the Galactic Solutions Initiative, accepts your proposal. The cheers that erupted from Earth's communications channels were matched by the harmonic resonance of approval and the excited chatter of his own crew. As he began making plans for the arrival of the Council diplomatic fleet, he reflected on how completely his understanding of the universe had changed. 6 months ago, he had believed that some problems were simply too big to solve, that some disasters were inevitable, that some species were too dangerous to approach. Humans had taught him that the only unsolvable problems were the ones you gave up trying to solve. They had shown him that cooperation between different types of consciousness could achieve impossible things. And his own crew had proven that any species could learn to see disasters not as endings, but as beginnings. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. And for the first time since his career began, Commander was looking forward to whatever impossible problem they would tackle next. After all, as the humans had taught him, there was always a solution. You just had to be brave enough to look for it.